Hey Reddit. I never thought I'd be writing something like this, but here I am. I'm Chris, 34, and up until a few weeks ago, I thought I was in a solid, committed relationship. My ex-fiancée, Amanda, 30, and I were together for 6 years and engaged for 2. She moved in with me shortly after we started dating, and we built what I thought was a great life together. We had plans to get married next summer. But then everything fell apart. It started small, as these things usually do. Amanda began acting distant, checking her phone more often, going out with friends, and coming back late, brushing me off when I asked how her day was. She used to be affectionate and talkative, but now she was moody and defensive. At first, I chalked it up to stress. She'd been complaining about work and her job search for her unemployed friend, Tom, who she swore was just a buddy, wasn't going well. But then there were red flags. Late nights with no explanation. A password suddenly added to her phone. New lingerie she never wore for me. I tried to ignore it, convincing myself I was paranoid. I loved Amanda, and I wanted to trust her. But my gut wouldn't let it go. The truth came out by accident, she'd been messaging Tom, the unemployed friend, for months. Their conversations weren't just flirty, they were explicit. They talked about nights they spent together while I was working late, plans to meet up when I was out of town, and even how she wished she'd met him first. My hands shook as I scrolled through the texts. One message hit me like a brick. I can't wait until we're finally living in Chris's house together. He doesn't deserve it anyway. I felt sick. My house, the one I'd worked so hard to buy, was apparently the place Amanda and Tom were planning to play house. When Amanda came home later, I confronted her. At first, she denied it, called me crazy, and even accused me of violating her privacy. But when I showed her the messages, her face went pale. She stammered out excuses. It's not what you think, we never meant to hurt you, I was lonely, and you weren't giving me enough attention. I couldn't believe the audacity. The woman I'd planned to marry was sitting there, trying to justify her betrayal, while I was left holding the pieces of our relationship. When Amanda realized she couldn't talk her way out of it, her attitude shifted. She stopped apologizing and started getting defensive. You never listened to me, Chris, she yelled. You've been so obsessed with your job and your house that you forgot about us. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Amanda, I said, my voice trembling. You've been sneaking around with another guy for a year, and you're blaming me for working hard to give us a future? She rolled her eyes and muttered something about how I was making it all about myself, which only fueled my anger. You lied to me, I said, raising my voice. You planned to steal my house, with your unemployed boyfriend. How the hell do you justify that? She didn't even flinch. Instead, she crossed her arms and said, Tom needs stability, and I deserve to be happy. You're being selfish, Chris. The house should be ours, not just yours. If you were a real man, you'd understand that. It felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I wasn't just heartbroken, I was furious. Get out, I said through gritted teeth. Get your things and leave. You're not staying here another night. Amanda didn't move. You can't just throw me out, she snapped. I've been living here for years. I have rights. That's when it hit me. She wasn't just trying to weasel out of blame. She was preparing to fight me for my house, the one I'd bought long before we met. The days after she left were some of the hardest of my life. I had so many emotions swirling inside me: anger, betrayal, sadness, and confusion. How could someone I loved and trusted do this? But the worst part came a week later when Amanda's lawyer sent me a letter. She was threatening to sue me for the house, claiming that because we'd been living together for years and she'd contributed to the household, she had a right to stay. The audacity of it left me speechless. Her reasoning? Since Tom was unemployed and they needed a place to live, it was only fair that I hand over the house. She even demanded that I pay for her legal fees because she couldn't afford them. Fair? Fair? There was nothing fair about it. I'd worked my ass off to buy this house, sacrificed nights and weekends to make the mortgage payments, and now she wanted to waltz in with her boyfriend and take it from me. The thought of Amanda and Tom lounging around in my living room, drinking coffee in the mornings, while I was out on the street, made my blood boil. But the betrayal cut deeper than the anger. I'd given her everything, my love, my trust, my future, and she threw it all away like it was nothing. I knew I had to fight back, not just for the house but for myself. If I rolled over now, she'd take everything, and I'd never forgive myself. I knew I needed a lawyer, someone who could help me fight back and make sure Amanda didn't get away with this insanity. I reached out to a friend who'd gone through a messy breakup, and he recommended a top-notch family attorney named Laura. Laura was sharp, no nonsense, and had seen cases like this before. When I explained the situation, she didn't seem surprised. "You'd be amazed at how many people think they can claim rights to a property just because they live there," she said. "But don't worry. Legally, she doesn't have a leg to stand on." Laura laid out a plan. First, she sent Amanda's lawyer a letter disputing her claims to the house. Amanda had never paid a dime toward the mortgage or utilities, and all the payments came from my bank account. There was no way she could argue that she'd contributed financially. Next, Laura advised me to change the locks and install security cameras. "You don't want her or her boyfriend sneaking back in," she said. It felt extreme, but I wasn't taking any chances. Meanwhile, I started gathering evidence to protect myself. I pulled out all the financial records showing I'd paid for the house on my own. I also dug up text messages and emails proving Amanda's infidelity. If she wanted a fight, I was ready for it. Amanda, of course, didn't take the letter well. She showed up at the house a few days later, banging on the door and screaming. "You're ruining my life, Chris!" she yelled. "You can't just throw me out like trash!" I didn't open the door. Instead, I calmly told her through the security intercom that if she didn't leave, I'd call the police. "You're trespassing, Amanda," I said. "This is my house, and you're not welcome here anymore." She didn't leave quietly. She spent another 10 minutes yelling about how unfair I was being, how I'd pushed her into Tom's arms, and how I'd regret this. But eventually she stormed off. Her lawyer must have realized she had no case because a week later, I got an email saying they were dropping the claim to the house. Amanda tried to negotiate for some kind of financial settlement, but I refused. She got nothing. The relief was overwhelming, but so was the sadness. I had my house, my freedom, and my dignity intact, but I'd lost the person I thought I'd spend my life with. Every room in the house was a reminder of the betrayal. It took a lot of work to start moving on. I repainted the walls, rearranged the furniture, and even replaced some of the things Amanda had picked out. I wanted to reclaim the space as mine, not hers, not theirs. Just as I was beginning to feel some sense of control, Amanda threw me a curveball. One day, I got a text from a mutual friend saying, "Hey, just a heads up, Amanda's been telling people you were abusive and that's why she left." I couldn't believe it. Amanda was now trying to tarnish my reputation to justify her actions. She was spinning a narrative where she was the victim, painting me as some kind of controlling monster. It stung because I'd never been anything but supportive. I'd worked extra hours to make sure she didn't have to worry about money. I'd encouraged her to pursue her hobbies and friendships. And now she was smearing my name to save her own. At first, I was furious. I wanted to confront her, to tell everyone the truth about what she'd done. But Laura warned me against it. "Let her dig her own grave," she said. "The people who matter will see through her lies." Still, it wasn't easy. Mutual friends stopped reaching out. Some even blocked me on social media. I felt isolated, like I was being punished for something I didn't do. But I decided I wasn't going to let Amanda control my narrative. Instead of lashing out, I focused on rebuilding. I confided in a few close friends who stuck by me and gave me the support I needed. They encouraged me to keep my head high and not stoop to Amanda's level. I also started seeing a therapist. At first, I was skeptical. Talking to a stranger about my feelings wasn't exactly my style. But it turned out to be one of the best decisions I ever made. The therapist helped me process the betrayal and understand that Amanda's actions weren't a reflection of my worth. She also helped me reframe my thinking. "You didn't lose Amanda," she said one day. "You dodged a bullet. She showed you who she really was, and now you're free to find someone who truly values you. With that mindset, I started to feel lighter. I poured my energy into work, hobbies, and even tried dating again. It wasn't easy. Trust doesn't come back overnight. But I met people who reminded me that not everyone is like Amanda. As for the house, I finally felt like it was mine again. I hosted small gatherings with friends, filled it with new memories, and even adopted a dog named Max. Every time Max greeted me at the door, tail wagging, I felt a little more at peace. About 6 months after the dust had settled, I ran into Amanda at the grocery store. She looked different, more tired and frazzled than I'd ever seen her. It caught me off guard because Amanda had always prided herself on her appearance. She spotted me before I could turn the other way. "Chris," she said, forcing a smile. "Can we talk?" I didn't want to, but something in her tone stopped me. Against my better judgment, I nodded. We stepped outside into the parking lot, where she started rambling about how things had gotten complicated with Tom. Apparently, Tom hadn't turned out to be the Prince Charming she imagined. He was still unemployed, and they were struggling to make ends meet. She tried to throw in a few jabs, saying I'd left her with no choice but to move in with him. But her words didn't sting the way they used to. Then she said the most unexpected thing. "I made a mistake, Chris. You were a good man. I just didn't realize it until it was too late." I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to yell at her, to let her know how much pain she'd caused. But another part of me felt nothing but pity. "I hope you figure things out, Amanda," I said, keeping my tone neutral. Then I walked away, leaving her standing there in the parking lot. That encounter was the closure I didn't know I needed. For months, I'd been haunted by questions. Why wasn't I enough? What could I have done differently? Seeing Amanda like that made me realize the truth. It wasn't about me. Her choices, her betrayal, and her selfishness were all on her. I started focusing even more on my own growth. I joined a local hiking group, something I'd always wanted to do but never had the time for. I reconnected with old friends, repaired strained relationships, and even started dating someone new, a kind, down-to-earth woman named Rachel who shared my love for the outdoors. Rachel wasn't flashy or dramatic like Amanda. She was warm, honest, and grounded. Being with her reminded me that relationships should feel like a partnership, not a power struggle. As for Amanda, I heard through the grapevine that she and Tom eventually split up. Last I heard, she moved back in with her parents, still trying to figure out her next steps. Reflecting on it all, I realized that Amanda's betrayal, while devastating, had given me a fresh start. It forced me to reevaluate what I wanted in life and in a partner. Most importantly, it taught me to trust myself again. As time went on, the pain of Amanda's betrayal faded into the background. It didn't control my life anymore. I was finally able to wake up in the mornings without that heavy feeling in my chest. I felt lighter, freer, like I'd stepped out of a storm and into the sun. Rachel and I continued seeing each other. She wasn't just a breath of fresh air, she was a reminder of what real, mutual respect felt like. We took things slow, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could truly be myself around someone. One evening, as we sat on my back patio with Max snoozing at our feet, Rachel asked me about Amanda. I hesitated at first, unsure of how much I wanted to share. But Rachel's patience and genuine curiosity made it easy to open up. "I don't hate her," I admitted, staring out at the yard. "I thought I would for a while. But honestly, I just feel sorry for her. She got so caught up in trying to chase something better that she lost sight of what she already had." Rachel nodded thoughtfully. "Sounds like you've made your peace with it," she said. "Yeah," I replied. "I think I have. It was hard, but I'm in a better place now." And I was. I'd reclaimed my life, my home, and my happiness. The house, once a painful reminder of Amanda's betrayal, had become my sanctuary again. It was filled with laughter, friends, and moments of joy that Amanda could no longer touch. For the first time in years, I was excited about the future, because it was mine to build. A few months after that heartfelt conversation with Rachel, I was walking Max in the park when I saw someone sitting alone on a bench, staring at their phone. It was Amanda. She looked up as Max bounded over to her, his tail wagging, oblivious to the tension in the air. "Max?" she said, her face lighting up for a moment before she realized I was right behind him. "Hey, Amanda," I said, keeping my tone casual. She looked like she wanted to say something, but words didn't come right away. Finally, she muttered, "I didn't expect to see you here." "Neither did I," I replied. There was an awkward pause before she reached down to pet Max, avoiding my gaze. "He's still such a good boy," she said softly. "Yeah, he is," I said, watching her. She looked tired, like she was carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. For a moment, I felt a pang of sympathy. "How have you been?" she asked after a while, her voice hesitant. "Good," I said simply. "Really good. And you?" Amanda hesitated, then shrugged. "I'm getting by," she said. "Things haven't been easy, but I'm figuring it out." I nodded, unsure of what to say. I didn't feel the need to offer her comfort or pretend that everything was okay between us. What was done was done. After a moment, Amanda looked up at me, her expression unreadable. "You seem happy, Chris," she said, her voice tinged with something I couldn't quite place. Regret, maybe. "I am," I said, and I meant it. She nodded, giving Max one last pat before standing up. "Well, take care of yourself," she said, her voice wavering slightly. "You too, Amanda," I replied. As I walked away, I realized that I didn't feel angry or sad. I didn't feel much of anything at all. That brief encounter felt like the final chapter of a book I was finally ready to close. Rachel and I went out for dinner that night, and as we laughed over a shared plate of fries, I realized how far I'd come. Amanda was a part of my past, but Rachel, and the life I was building now, was my future. One of the hardest parts of moving on after Amanda was learning to embrace happiness without guilt. For months after she left, even little moments of joy felt tainted by everything I'd been through. But as time went on, I began to rediscover the things that made me feel alive. One of those things was hiking. Rachel and I started going on weekend hikes together, exploring trails I'd never bothered with before. She had a way of making even the simplest moments feel like adventures. On one hike, we reached the summit of a small mountain just in time for sunset. Standing there, with the world bathed in shades of gold and pink, I realized how much lighter my heart felt. "I think this is the happiest I've been in years," I told Rachel. She smiled, slipping her hand into mine. "I'm glad," she said. "You deserve to be happy, Chris." Hearing that was like a weight being lifted off my shoulders. For so long, I'd carried the shame and anger of Amanda's betrayal, letting it cloud everything else. But now, I could see the good things in my life for what they were, a fresh start, a chance to build something real. Rachel and I didn't rush into anything. We both valued our independence, and took time to enjoy the simple pleasure of getting to know each other. We'd spend lazy Sundays cooking breakfast together, watch old movies on rainy nights, and take Max on long walks. It wasn't flashy or dramatic, but it was exactly what I needed. One evening, Rachel surprised me with a scrapbook she'd been working on. Inside were pictures from our hikes, ticket stubs from concerts we'd gone to, and even a photo of Max snoozing on the couch. "I thought we should keep track of all the good memories," she said, handing it to me. Flipping through the pages, I felt a swell of gratitude. My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine again. And for the first time in a long time, it felt full of possibility. As life started to settle into a new normal, I found myself reflecting more and more on what I'd been through. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the fights over the house, it was all behind me now, but the lessons it taught me lingered. One of the biggest lessons was resilience. For a long time, I thought being strong meant never feeling pain, never letting anything break me. But I learned that real strength is picking yourself up, piece by piece, after everything falls apart. I realized I'd spent too much of my relationship with Amanda ignoring red flags because I didn't want to see the truth. I'd put her happiness above my own, convinced that sacrificing for her was what love was supposed to be. But love, I've learned, isn't about losing yourself for someone else. It's about building each other up, not tearing each other down. Rachel and I had those tough conversations early on, about boundaries, trust, and what we wanted out of life. It wasn't always easy, but it was honest. And that honesty became the foundation for something solid and real. I also learned the importance of leaning on others. Whether it was Laura's legal expertise, the advice of close friends, or the support of my therapist, I couldn't have gotten through any of this alone. Asking for help wasn't a sign of weakness, it was a way to move forward. One day, while I was sitting on the porch with Max at my feet, I realized how far I'd come. The house, once a battleground of betrayal, now felt like a sanctuary. The scars from my past were still there, but they no longer defined me. Looking back, I didn't just survive what Amanda put me through, I grew from it. I was stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever came next. A year after Amanda left, I found myself standing in the backyard, grilling burgers with Rachel and some friends. Max was chasing a ball around, tail wagging like he was the happiest dog on earth. The laughter of my friends mixed with the sizzle of the grill, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt completely at peace. Amanda was a distant memory now. I didn't feel anger or sadness when I thought about her, just gratitude for the lessons I'd learned and the life I'd built after her. I realized that sometimes, the worst experiences can pave the way for the best things in life. Rachel had become an important part of my journey forward. We hadn't rushed into anything serious, but our connection grew stronger with each passing day. She brought out the best in me, and I like to think I did the same for her. As the evening wound down, Rachel pulled me aside. "You know," she said, a playful smile on her face, "you've come a long way since we first met." I nodded, returning her smile. "I couldn't have done it without you," I said. She tilted her head, studying me for a moment. "You know what I think? I think you would have figured it out, with or without me. You're stronger than you'd give yourself credit for, Chris." Her words stayed with me long after the night ended. I realized she was right. I'd weathered the storm and come out the other side, not because of anyone else, but because I'd chosen to fight for myself. The next morning, as I stood on the porch with my coffee, Max lounging at my feet, I took a deep breath and smiled. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. And for the first time in a long time, I felt ready for whatever came next. This wasn't just the end of a story, it was the beginning of a new one. A better one. A story I was proud to call my own.